Coming up is part 2 of our conversation with Josh Neighbors of LockedOn Nationals. We're talking some of the top Nationals prospects: Jackson Rutledge, Cade Cavalli, Brady House. How are they going to do in Washington? And is it going to be enough to get Juan Soto to sign an extension? So part 2 of our conversation with LockedOn Nationals coming up right here on LockedOn MLB Prospects.
You are Locked On MLB Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, part 2 of the conversation between myself, Josh Neighbors, and Lindsey Crosby. I am the host of Locked On Nationals. He is the host. What we calling it, Locked On Farm now? Locked On Prospects? What's the proper title?
So it is Locked On MLB Prospects, but the Twitter account had a bunch of underscores and things, and I just said, you know what? Locked On Farm is easy to remember. So
Which
the Twitter
is awesome.
account's
I
Locked
love
On
Locked
Farm.
On Farm. That's great. Locked On Farm is awesome. All right.
I was amazed it was available.
Which is great. You're right. Locked On Farm. It's very good. If you guys missed part 1, we talked about the Nationals signing Christian Vaquero, talked about a guy signed last year in the international draft, Armando Cruz. We talked about Seth Romero and his situation right now at the Nationals and his potential future as well. So make sure you guys check that out on both feeds, wherever you guys get your podcasts from. This one's going to be more of a general kind of thought about where the Nationals, some of their top guys are, where they are as a farm, and also let Lindsey get in here and talk about, his thoughts as a team. It's always good to get the outsider perspective on the team to hear what other people think. A little dose of reality is always pretty good, although I will say I'm a bit of a skeptic. But there are more farm players to be excited about than they had in the past. All right. So we touched on Brady House in the first one a little bit. So I'm going to kind of cycle him to back. Let's talk about pitching really fast, Lindsey. Let's not real fast. We'll talk as long as we want to about it. But this team, when they won a World Series, who were the big 3 arms? Max Scherzer, Steven Strasburg, Patrick Corbin were your big 3, right?
Good big 3.
Good, it's good, very good big 3, yeah, when they had it, right? One of those guys is a homegrown player, right? Steven Strasburg. And now, obviously, the injuries are catching up to him and so on, which has been difficult. But they've really tried to get as many guys as possible, from the farm system up into the pitching ranks. But it's not worked for them, right? Eric Fetty kind of being number 1. Seth Romero with his transgressions. It felt like maybe he could have been up there a bit faster, but his injuries, transgressions have kept him from kind of moving up the ranks in a meaningful way. Well, they've got 2 guys now in Jackson Rutledge and Cade Cavalli. I'm a Jackson Rutledge stan. I think this kid is legit. I think anybody from San Jacinto, this. San Jacinto is a stamp of approval in the college ranks, is it not? That is. It's one of the best. I guess it was a junior college community, CC, whatever it is. He is a guy that I think is Nationals fans should be hopeful about. That's where I want to start. Your impressions of Rutledge, what you've seen so far of him in the professional level, and the timetable. Give us the whole 9 yards, please.
Okay, so reminder of who Jackson Rutledge is. 2019 draft pick, number 17 overall, got a bonus of like $3.5 million. Massive human being, 6'8", 250 pounds. He is an incredibly large person. But the thing about being that size is he can harness it really well. So Jackson Rutledge has a great fastball that can reach triple digits. And it's not just a fastball that you stand there and it blows past you. It's deceptive. So the fastball has a lot of good tail on it. And I think especially against a lefty, it's going to give them a lot of trouble when he can pump it up. He can pump it up fast and he can run it in on you. So that's the conversation with Rutledge. Starts off great fastball. Okay. The slider wipeout pitch. I mean, this is a slider that when it works, when he can harness it correctly, this is a pitch that can make or break an at-bat. I mean, this is an out pitch. This is a pitch that you call on when it's a full count and bases loaded. This is a key pitch, but he has to learn to locate it better. The issue he has right now is he's got the best intentions with it, but he can't always throw it for a strike when he wants to. So when it's on, amazing pitch. And supposedly that's what he's been working on a lot in the offseason this year. I'm excited for whenever minor league camp actually happens so I can get my eyes on him, because what I've heard is he's been working specifically on the slider. And then something that I want him to do, and I think once he does this, it's really going to unlock things for him, is I want him to figure out his third pitch. He's got a curveball. He's got a changeup. They're both a little the issue with the changeup is it doesn't have enough difference between the fastball and the change. Like when he slows it down enough, like where it needs to be, it doesn't move at all. And obviously, you throw a pitch slowly, it doesn't move at all. That's BP. I mean, Pete Alonso puts that in the stands. And so what I need him to do is I needed him to either make the curveball more dynamic, if they didn't put a crackdown on sticky stuff last year, I really think that he could have fixed his curveball pretty quickly. But I'm glad that he hadn't figured it out when they went ahead and said no more sticky stuff, so that now he has to figure out the correct way to throw it.
How did you feel about that situation? Because, and also, is there a difference between how it's regulated in the minors as it is the majors? What is the effect? Because they teach this. This is kind of a taught behavior all the way up the ladder. Is there a difference? Are you being primed for the majors because of how it's enforced? What's the difference for folks that don't know?
I think the biggest issue is you don't use the same baseball all the way through. Okay. So MLB has different levels of baseballs, and we've heard all of the reporting, whether it's The Athletic or different places, all about how they juice the ball and then dejuice the ball and everything. But the major league ball is the same ball you use at AAA. Double A and single A for the longest time used a different ball, and it's theoretically it's the same. It's supposed to be the same ball, but it's a lower quality as far as the standard from ball to ball. So the highest quality baseballs are selected for MLB and AAA, and then the lower grade ones are Double A and Single A. And so whenever you see a guy called up straight from Double A to the pros, you have to be mindful of, one, he's adjusting to a different baseball.
That is insane.
It doesn't make sense. Some teams have started to spend the money to get that professional baseball at their Double A site. And it's something where you go through so many in a season that Single A maybe isn't worth it, but at least Double A, they're trying to get that, because you see more teams now bring guys from Double A straight to the big leagues, especially pitchers. Pitchers are guys who I feel like, depending on proximity where your AAA team is and your Double A team is to Washington.
Yes.
Yeah, like it's one of those. Atlanta likes to bring their pitchers from AAA because it's right down the street. It's different for everybody. But
I live in Richmond. That is the team that they took from Richmond. Gwinnett, I believe it's Gwinnett, right? AAA now.
Gwinnett. Yeah, the Gwinnett. It's now the Stripers. It's not the Gwinnett Braves anymore. It's now the Gwinnett Stripers. But yeah, like that's something where they're using different balls, and so they may learn, what's the combination of grip substance that I need. But in the end, you have to relearn that at AAA. So I don't quite have great stats on which teams give their Double A team the pro balls and which ones don't. But I think that's something. And honestly, side note, I just want MLB to do like Korean baseball does and just have a slightly tacky ball. The baseball in Korea and Japan just is already pre-treated, and it's a little bit tacky, and it's enough where you can get a grip. You have that control, but it's not so much where it influences how the ball actually spins and moves through the air. So side note, I just want them to go ahead and do that. The players want it. It would solve this whole problem, because you can just say, you don't get anything because we fixed the ball. But do we trust MLB to actually do anything correctly with the baseball?
Nothing actually correctly in anything. Exactly. I want to ask you. So I want to ask you about, when you watch Rutledge throw, when I watch Max Scherzer throw, right? Effortless is definitely not the word I would use. It's a very max effort, every rep, just all out, right? When I watch Rutledge throw, it's the opposite. It is effortless velocity. Does that help you kind of is that easier on the arm? Does it look easier on the arm for some guys? Does that help longevity? What's that kind of process like?
So when we're trying to project a prospect out, a pitching prospect, one of the things we look for is their arm action violent or easy? And there's a lot of guys you might hear him described. So Seattle's Matt Brash. He's a guy who a lot of folks are high on his potential and his stuff, but his arm action is so violent that it seems like he's not going to be able to sustain it. I think about the poster child of this to me. I think about Tim Lincecum. Tim Lincecum was a smaller stature guy. And when his stuff was there, I felt like he was great. But when he was injured, it wasn't the same. And he got injured so often because of his arm action and how violent it was.
Violent, yes.
Yeah, very violent. Rutledge, it seems to come really easy. And you can tell that he's had coaching from somebody who understood the kinetic chain, who had studied kinesiology and really knew how to do a repeatable motion that's lower stress. So part of that is his size. He's just such a big person. You don't have to put as much effort in to get mid 90s on your fastball. He could put more work on his motion. He could probably hit triple digits. He has the physical build for it, but then he would increase the violence on his arm to the point where you would begin to worry about injuries. And I don't think he was fully healthy in 2021 anyway. Some of the people in the organization that I talked to and I heard from, they thought he was just nicked up all year. He looks, because it's so effortless, he looks like everything's fine. But in reality, he wasn't fully healthy. I think his velocity is going to probably be 96, 97 when he's fully healthy, simply because his action is so smooth, so fluid. But I'm really excited to see what he looks like again once we finally get a minor league season, and then assuming he's now fully healthy again.
Let's talk about Cade Cavalli, another guy and he seems a bit more major league ready. Is that a fair term? He's a little bit older, right? He is his pretty mature body. He's a big kid, 6'4", 230. To me, there's sometimes I think to myself, like, he looks bigger than I'm like, he looks kind of more lean. I can never really get a read on how I feel about him, but he just seems like a bit more mature guy. I mean, he seems like he's just kind of powering his way through the ranks. And this is somebody we're going to see in the major leagues real soon. Mm-hmm. I know everybody wants, the Nationals, there's no reason to rush guys right now, right? You want to make sure they can get guys in good spots to succeed. Don't want to push anything too early, but this kid's making a move.
He is. And so the big thing behind Cade Cavalli, obviously first round pick out of Oklahoma in 2020, and he dealt with some injuries in college. And so I think not having a 2020 season was probably a really good thing for him. It gave him a chance to get healthy. Obviously, he was at the alternate site and did some of that stuff. But last year, you saw him started off in high A, ended up in triple A, was healthy all season, showed he could take a heavy workload. I think he threw 125 innings across all three levels last year. And he did struggle a bit at triple A. And it looked like he struggled trying to get outs in the zone. So a lot of what he does, I mean, obviously we know his stuff is a complete separator. I mean, he has some of the best stuff in the national system. And he's got, whether it's the fastball, which is already above 95, it comfortably sits there. He can get it to 100 if he needs to. His delivery, same as Rutledge, very easy delivery, very powerful. He's got a good changeup. I think it could be better. The ball does have good action, but he can improve it a bit. He's got two different breaking balls that he feels comfortable at throwing for strikes, which is not something you see all the time. He's got a power curve and a slider. And then his sinker is a project pitch, I think. But he's a good athlete. He's got everything that he needs to, I would say, be, provided AAA goes okay, be in Washington by the All-Star break. And I think he has what it takes to be a contributing member of this rotation as soon as 2022 in the back half. I mean, this is some of the best stuff in your system. And he's a guy that I'm really excited for. I think he has the potential in a couple of years to be your number one or number two. Like, that's how good this kid is. And it's all because, honestly, I think it's all because he didn't have to play in 2020, because he didn't have a 2020 season. It gave him time to get healthy. It gave him time to work on some stuff. And I think it's paying off.
That 2020 is such an interesting season because the way it affected everybody. And I'm not sure how you feel about this, but I am, my one big concern, about the lockout right now is the schedule, because these players, especially, I'm worried about pitchers mostly.
Yeah.
They're such creatures of habit. And to have multiple seasons in this would be 2 out of the last 3 seasons that are not normal. But the problem is, to your body, none of them become normal, right? If you go, even extend it to 4, right? You throw 162 in 2019, or, you do 116 in 2019, you shorten it to 60 and have the camp, then cut the camp, then redo the camp, right? In 2020. The short camp. Then you go back to 2021, normality. Then you go back to 2022, maybe not normal. That's my concern. I'm sure you're seeing this across both guys in the pros and across guys in the minor leagues. Is everybody being affected differently? Is it just kind of a hit or miss? Like, this guy's done well, it's kind of hurt this guy. It's helped this guy. It doesn't help that guy.
So on average, we saw soft tissue injuries last year up, I want to say 160-ish%.
Jesus, man.
And a lot of it was, like you said, just a lot of the variability in the workload. And for the minor leaguers, we're seeing, especially the guys who didn't get to go to the alternate site, we're seeing they weren't able to ramp up quite like they wanted last year.
Right.
And we actually talked about this on last Monday's Locked on MLB Prospects, but there's an advantage here for teams that still have a good scouting department, where I feel like you're going to be able, if you can get eyes on a guy, you can't just go off of stats right now, and you can't evaluate performance off of what a guy did on paper. You need to see them throw. You need to see how healthy they were, and you need to talk to them and find out. Like a guy like Cavalli, I think he would tell you that he's better coming out of the lockout. I'm sorry, the pandemic year.
Right.
What I would worry about right now is if I had a prospect who was really toolsy, but didn't necessarily have the technique. And that's pitchers and hitters, fielders, everybody. A guy who had the physical talents, but needed to practice
need the reps. They get the reps.
They need the live reps. And that's because when you're doing stuff at home, like you were in 2020, when you're in a season like 2021, where you're not throwing as much because they're trying to avoid ramping up your workload too much, you struggle. Like, it's really easy to practice on your own and ingrain a bad habit. And so if you have a guy who's super toolsy, who has a lot of inherent talent, but needs technique, that's a guy who you're seeing isn't going to progress like you thought he would last season and this season. And that's a guy where you have to understand, you've got to give him some more time. You got to be patient with him, simply because they didn't get that hands-on instruction. And in some cases, they learned bad habits. I remember reading stories about during the pandemic, there were major league pitchers who were going to public ball fields to throw. They didn't have radar guns.
In Florida, I remember hearing these stories. It was amazing.
They didn't know how fast they were throwing. They didn't know what was actually a strike and wasn't. And they got into seasons in 2020. Mike Fulton, now with the Rangers, he's a great example of a guy who used to throw in the high 90s, but when he was at home during the pandemic, all he did was cardio and throw against a wall, and he lost a bunch of weight. He thought he was throwing harder than he was. He thought he was still up in the high 90s. He was in the high 80s, and he had no idea. And so when the season actually started, he's just getting shelled. He's getting shelled because he thinks he's up there pumping gas, and he's not. And so guys that, and I especially worry about the lower level guys who didn't get to come to the alternate site. So, Cavalli was okay. Rutledge was okay. The lower level guys in the system who were on their own for 2020, especially your pitchers. That's where you worry about their ability to contribute this year. And that's why I think it's important for some of these guys like a Rutledge to maybe spend a little bit of time in the minors, making sure that their bodies are acclimated to the workload before you bring them to Washington this year. Just give them a chance to ramp up normally, especially if we have a shortened spring training. Give them a chance to ramp their bodies up slowly and be ready for the workload, and then bring them to Washington.
I'm with you on that.
It's the new year, and new year means New Year's resolutions. If yours is about getting fit or eating healthier, check out Built Bars. Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. It's the only protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. 130 calories, 17 grams of protein. It's great for you. So go to built.com, check out all the flavors: coconut almond, peanut butter brownie, raspberry cookies and cream, salted caramel, mint brownie, just some of the regulars. And then they have stuff in rotation, limited time things that come out all the time. So go to built.com. While you're there, use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCKED15 at built.com.
All right, so let's talk about some of the guys that are more, position players. And you and I talked about Brady House in our last episode. Let's hit on him here more again. It sounds like they're giving him the chance to try and play shortstop, but you and I really do see, down the line, like he's just kind of too big. Like that's the deal. And look, that's a position for guys who are athletic. I think compact might be the right word, right? There are some bigger dudes who play shortstop, but you're thinking about more guys who are compact, the arm motion's shorter, just the kind of guys who can turn those double plays, who can flip the ball over to first pretty fast. Mm-hmm. He doesn't fit that bill. He wants to try. I think the Nationals will, once again, let him try, but his future is at a corner.
Yeah, and he's a guy that, like we said, big guy, 6'4", 215. Right. Last we heard, I think he's probably even bigger now. He can make the routine plays. So he's not going to be a liability at short, but he's definitely shortstop and center field are your premier defensive positions, and his offense is going to be great. He's a guy that we project out. He's going to be. He could have 70 grade power. He can hit bombs, but physically, he has the arm for the position, but he has a good internal clock. He has the hands, but I just don't think he's going to have the range where you can count on him to be anything more than at best league average. And I think rather than taking an average shortstop defensively, I would trade that for an above average to great defensive third baseman or first baseman. Now, he's probably best suited for third base. You kind of have somebody there already. So, let's see how that goes. But let's not think that his job is to come out there and give you great defense. His job is to come out there and hit bombs. And it looks like he's going to do that. We talked about it on the last show, but he's got a great swing with just ridiculous bat speed. When he hits a ball, and he can hit a ball out from all fields, he can spray it across the field. He's not somebody that's just muscling the ball out. It's smooth, it's fluid. Right. It's a combination of bat speed, his bat path, his batter's eye, and he's a guy where I see the comp, and I said this last show too, I don't love to give comps. I don't want to give people a false sense of what this player is going to be, but I think of his comp as something like an Austin Riley, a bigger bodied guy that's a good enough athlete who, if you need to throw him in left field for a little bit, he can do that. If you need to throw him somewhere, he can play third, he can play first or whatever, but he's going to go out there and hit bombs for you. He's going to give protection to Soto in the lineup. And he's there to give you offense, and he can do that no matter if he's playing third or first, or if he's DHing, if the National League gets the DH. I do think that would be a waste of his defensive talents, but he could do third, first. He could probably play a little outfield in the pinch.
Yeah, he's that's one of the variety things, right? It's like when the Nationals were really happy when he fell. When he fell to them, they were so pleased about that, and they did not draft him, I think, thinking this is our shortstop of the future, right? That was not really the thought when you draft him. Let's talk about a couple guys who are kind of like recent graduates, I guess you could say, of the prospect ranks. We've got two guys right now. Carter Kieboom's been there for a bit more. It's pretty clearly a prove it year, right? This is like the prove it year for Carter Kieboom. Mm-hmm. Luis Garcia is in the majors, but you look at his age, he's so young to where if it doesn't go well at 22, you're kind of like, well, you can't give up on the kid because he's 22, right? I always think about sports, usually players get drafted this way. Like in 3 years, he's going to be 25. 3 years is a long time. 25 is not old, right? So how do you approach each one of these guys? Because the Nationals, let's hope, give them shots to prove their worth this year, because the Nationals are not going for gold. They're not going for division title. These two former prospects, now major league starters, are going to get their shot.
So Garcia, I like Garcia more as a second baseman than a shortstop, and that's
Yes,
not what you want to
100%.
hear when Trey Turner just left, and you're thinking about, I have to have somebody play shortstop now. I know you don't love to hear that, but he seems to me like his future is going to be there, and it's something where he's got solid offensive skills, but he needs to get better at strike zone recognition. So you can still get him on pitches outside. You can get him to chase a slider away. And defensively, he can make the plays you need him to make at shortstop, but I think that he translates into an above average or probably in defender at second. But the issue there is, do you get enough offense from a position that you don't need as premium of defense? You get enough offense to make it worth it. And the advantage of being in the situation you are now and your season this year, I think that you give him all season to figure it out. You let him play. You say, okay, we've got Cesar Hernandez to play second. You can play. We're going to let you try short. Maybe he can do it. Maybe I'm wrong. I think it's something where he's not anything better than above average speed wise. And I think that's what's ultimately going to limit him from short. He might be a guy who starts off at short and has to move to second pretty quickly. I think like a Brandon Phillips. I think like a Rosario, a guy who starts off at short and has to move to second a little bit later in their career. But offensively, I still do worry. He struggled a little bit at Double-A. He struggled in the Arizona Fall League. I'm curious to see what he does with a full year in the majors. If he gets a chance to start, is he even going to start this year?
Yeah, I mean this is the problem, right? So you go back to 2020 and you think about third base, right? We hear it's Carter Kieboom's job, and who do we see out there on the opening day? It's Asdrubal Cabrera, and leaning on vets is what helped the Nats win a title. But this is not that. This is not where you are. This situation now where, like they re-signed Alcides Escobar. It would be a damn shame if Alcides Escobar and even also Cesar Hernandez block young guys, because, man, what's the point? Like, what is the point of you're not trying to win games this year? Right. Now, Garcia is it's an example of like he's so young. He needs reps. Do you really want to give him reps at the major league? Like, is that where he needs to be getting reps? That's kind of my thing is like, what is the plan for these guys? Now Keyboom needs the reps. He needs a full season. It's time to say, hey, am I a guy or not? But also, this is one. I could totally see a situation where they get rid of Carter Keyboom and he goes somewhere else and does great, because this is a change of scenery sport where that stuff happens all the time. It's just one of those weird things. But for Garcia, he is a much more. It's not a clear-cut situation, right? It's not like survive or die. Carter Keyboom is like sink or swim, buddy. That's kind of where you're at.
And the thing with Garcia is I worry about, like, we never have a really young player. I mean, 20, and Soto's the exception to this. Everybody has to understand Juan Soto is an exception in every possible way. So you can't compare anything to him. But a guy that young, you worry about their confidence. And I think the best thing to do is to start him at AAA. Defensively, I think he can handle most of the routine plays at short on the big league level, but I don't think he's ready for big league pitching. And if you put him at the MLB level and you let him start at short, I just worry that he's going to struggle enough offensively where you're going to destroy any confidence he has. So let Escobar do it for a bit until you get until he shows that he can do it at AAA and bring him up. And I actually think this is what the Nationals need to do this year is, as you're re-signing guys once the lockout's over and bringing in vets, I think you need to be finding vets on one-year deals that you can turn around and move once the prospect behind them is ready to go. You have a lot of guys like Ruiz who is can be in AAA, can play every day. And once you make sure that they're comfortable and they got it, you can bring them up, give it 2 or 3 weeks to make sure it's not a fluke. And then you can turn around and you can take a guy like an Escobar, like a Cesar Hernandez.
Michael Franco, I actually think could be
a
prime candidate. Because when I saw it signing, I was like, I'm seeing I was visualizing in my head a situation. I call it camp. For some reason, my mind thinks camp, but spring training where he just rakes. And on opening day, it's like there's Michael Franco at third, and you're like, "What are we doing? What is the point
Yeah.
of this?"
Or D Gordon at second. D Gordon's in your system
that
now.
cannot happen. That cannot. I saw it, and I was like, "Look," because here's the thing: he's one of those guys where he's the fielding version of John Lester. It was age up, numbers down, and it's like, look, you can bring this guy in to have some, to be an influence in camp. Like Franco, is one of those guys where, I could totally see him having a really, really nice. He could be the third base version of Josh Harrison, right? Josh Harrison, you brought him off the street, and what happened? Somebody traded for him. Somebody wanted to trade for Josh Harrison.
Exactly.
That could happen with Franco. That is not happening with D Gordon. There's no reason for D Gordon to be on the team after spring training is over, taking spots from a young guy. But I will say, it's like Garcia is that example of reps, right? Where do you want the reps to be? What do you want them to look like? Is it an everyday deal? Is he? He'll be a major leaguer, but is he everyday in major leagues? Well, if he's not, he should be down AAA being an everyday guy. The catching thing, and we can hit on this right now, is they've got Adams, they've got Keibert Ruiz. Those two to me seem to be the tandem. I think Adams might get a little bit of run at first. We'll see what happens. Ryan Zimmerman, obviously, that's the next domino to fall in that situation. And also they got a catcher in the A's trade. I always forget the kid's name. So I think Ruiz will be there from the start. And I think it's just that's how that's going to work. But I don't think Nats fans, they want to see nurturing. They don't want to see a situation where vets are taken away from young guys.
Yeah, and the Riley Adams situation, it's having those two young catchers. I feel like that's a situation where you want one veteran and you want a young guy, and then you send the other guy to AAA.
The problem is they got two young guys is the issue.
Yeah, and so at a certain point, you need to decide which guy is figuring it out at AAA, which guy is figuring it out at the big leagues. You went out, you get Riley Adams. I thought Riley Adams looked fine.
He plays,
and then you turn around and you get another catcher. And to me, it's like, okay, I understand you got a haul for Turner and Scherzer, but you have to decide which guy do you think is the guy? I think Riley Adams is the guy.
I think he should play first. I think you should try him some at first. I think he can, because if you can sprinkle him in with Josh Bell at first, and also he can catch on the days where Ruiz, because Ruiz is a player that you gave. I mean, you gave like, I don't like that trade. I really did not like the trade they made for the Max Scherzer trade. I think they could have robbed one of those teams absolutely blind and gotten similar haul they got for not
everybody else has robbed the Padres. Go rob them too.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not even sure Trey Turner had to be that involved for them to get some of the guys they got back, and that's an issue in itself. But when you give up that much, like it's one of those things where when you're deciding between Rendon and Strasburg about who you're going to sign, right? I know both guys were with the organization forever, but who do you have to pick? Strasburg. Who was the guy that had everybody buzzing about when it was Strasburg pitching against the Pirates on a random day in whatever year he debuted in, right? It was Strasburg, like World Series MVP, Strasburg. So because he is the crown jewel of a draft, you have to re-sign him. When you get a guy who's one of the jewels of a trade, you have to roll with him because it's what it's what GMs do. Right? It's what teams do. We made an investment for you. We have to play you. Now, your strategy is the right one, right? Whoever's better should earn the spot. But it's, I think Ruiz did enough last year to warrant that number one catcher spot, but they got to find ways to get Riley Adams in the lineup. That was clear last year. You got to see what you have here because this guy might be a real good player.
And I think the best case scenario for you guys in that is universal DH, where you can take a guy like a Josh Bell, let him DH, and versus doing that system where you just kind of rotate guys for the DH. Now you have the ability. Riley Adams can learn first on the job, while Keibert Ruiz learns catcher on the job. Josh Bell was a known quantity. Josh Bell is almost 30 years old. You know what he is. You know he can play first. He can do whatever he needs to do. And so you let Adams
and they're going to get the
Ruiz
DH, right? I mean, I think that's kind of the sentiment
I
here.
think the consensus is that that's what's going to come out of this. Yeah.
Right. Because at that point you're going to get Riley Adams basically every day, right? In some capacity. And that's the thing is the kid's he's got some pop. I mean, he's got some real piece of bigger kid. He's got some good pop. And it also, like you said, it lets Ruiz fully learn that position.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, I don't want to say it's like a football team where if you have two quarterbacks, you don't have a quarterback, but catcher is one of those positions. You really need a guy that does 75% of the catching and a guy that does 25.
That's why we see catchers going higher now in the draft, right? It's why we're seeing those guys,
And I want to say it's one of the shows last week, I think it was last Wednesday, we talked all about catchers or Tuesday, we talked all about catchers, how you see so many catchers going higher. You see so many college catchers, and it's because it takes so long for a catcher to figure out how to manage a pitching staff,
right,
and how to call a game. And those are all things that we
I mean, think about all of it. Sorry to cut you off, but like everything that goes into being a catcher is you got to play the offense, right? You got to do that. But like the second baseman is not having to form a personal relationship with and not only that, like not just the starters, right? It's the bullpen guys too. And you got to understand all these guys. And it's like you said, the quarterback is a perfect thing because the catcher has to be the smartest guy on the field because he is thinking about who is batting, who is pitching. Every single at bat, he is thinking about that stuff and processing it. That's why there's such a premium. I think it was Henry Davis, right? The Louisville kid.
Yeah.
That's why he went number one. That's why we're seeing more of those guys because there was such a premium on getting a guy. He's like the quarterback. He's got to basically coach him up.
And the hard part is we don't have a good way to measure all of that stuff for a catcher. Right. You know, we're now at the point where we can measure framing. And so we can give you a score and we can say, oh, this guy's bad at framing or good at framing, but we can't measure all of that other stuff. And so you have to just give guys reps to do it. And if you try to split time between these two catchers, it's not going to work. Ruiz has to have the chance to learn it. Obviously, if something happens to him, if he's injured or ineffective, you can make a switch, but you have to pick one. Of the two, like I said, I like Adams more as a complete player, but like you said, I do think he's probably going to end up at first. And I think I think athletically he can do first. He can be fine. He's not like some of the new catchers we see that can play the outfield. Miami had Jorge Alfaro. I mean, he was playing in the outfield. Dalton Varsho for Arizona, same thing.
Bryce Harper started off as a catcher. You know, I mean, he ends up in the outfield because he's a good athlete. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's something where he's good enough where he can play a corner, and you want to find a way to get both their bats in the lineup. And ultimately that's what's going to have to happen is one of them has to go to first. And I think Adam should be that guy. Yeah. BetOnline wants to wish you a happy new betting year as we continue our march through the NFL playoffs. Because BetOnline remains the #1 spot for all the best sports wagering action for 2022. So on this new year, take advantage of this new updated desktop and mobile website to sign up today and get your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. The promo code is locked on to get started, whether it's football, basketball, hockey, boxing, or UFC. You can take advantage of all of the amazing offers across all of 2022 because BetOnline is the easiest and fastest way to wager on all of your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts.
All right, so Lindsay, you got some thoughts about what this Nats team is going to be next year, and you and I, we appear to be in some kind of lockstep, right? It's all about seeing. So Juan Soto is made. Two things are at play here. Number one, you want to see what you got. Number two, you got to show Juan Soto your commitment to building something, for the future. Now, I will say this because he is so damn good at baseball, Mr. Juan Soto, it doesn't take a whole lot actually to build a really good lineup. If you watch Nationals this year, the problem was not the lineup. The bullpen lost 42 games. If you cut that in half, which, you kind of goals, whatever, like you can start to have a conversation about, okay, how do we make this team a little bit better in each one of these places? You can't even assess the team basically because the pen was so god awful last year. So to me, that's where it starts. Now I'm looking definitely at the fielding, right? Ruiz, Adams, Keyboom, Garcia, Lane Thomas, question mark. Is
Mhm.
this the last stand of one Victor Robles in center field, which I believe it should be,
It should
because
be.
he's one of those guys who I feel like is going to go somewhere else and start raking. It's going to be awful for Nationals fans when it does happen. So how do you view this season? How should they manage all right, what do we got with some guys? Like what should be the approach, do you think?
Okay, so when it comes to filling some of the holes on the team, if you're going to sign a guy, it needs to be a vet on a short-term deal, and you need to prioritize those guys that can be a bridge to the prospects. The goal is you can't completely tank. Okay, you have 2.5 years to show Juan Soto that this team can compete again for the division and compete to make to the World Series. So you sign veterans that you are comfortable getting rid of at the trade deadline. You need to make sure that you're getting your prospects time. And then I think the biggest key this upcoming season, and I don't want to be the bad guy here, I think that best case scenario,
Go ahead.
yeah, you're looking at 70-win team next year. Okay.
Like that is like very
Best
much
case, yeah.
Here's the thing. The first move they made this offseason was re-signing Alcides Escobar. God bless him. Was pretty actually effective, relatively speaking, but had not played baseball in like 2 years. And, once again, great accounting of himself at shortstop. But when you're signing, and fans always want to do this, but the one thing I'll push back on is 2.5 years too long to try to show Juan Soto. Do you only have a year? Like, do you only have a year and a half? How do you manage that? Because there's a part of me that thinks you do have to make a signing or two that's like, hey, this guy is going to be a part of the team when we are contending, right? Totally blanking on his name. Guy that the Mets signed, third baseman, Escobar. Right? Is that his name? Yeah.
Wow, I blinked too.
Eduardo Escobar. Escobar, right? 3-year contract. Hey, this guy's going to be a decent player over there, right? And I'm not saying that the Nats should sign a third baseman, but players like, Starlin Marte. Hey, we're committing to a center fielder, right?
Mm-hmm.
This guy's going to get a 3-year contract. Sure, we might suck this year, but in 1 or 2 years, this guy's going to be a part of your outfield. You're going to be next to him. He's your partner in crime out there, wherever he is going to play in the outfield. That kind of thing. Do you think you have to shorten the timetable in your opinion, or do you think they get the full 2.5 to make the point?
So you're in the worst case scenario when it comes to the time frame, because you have to think about who is Soto's agent. It's Scott Boras. And Scott Boras is notorious for his guys are going to make it to free agency. So I think the Nationals are going to know or have a pretty good idea in a year and a half, is Soto going to come back or not? But they're never going to know for sure until he gets to free agency and either re-signs with the Nationals or goes somewhere else. And that it's going to be as expensive as humanly possible to make that Soto deal as well, because Scott Boras is the agent. So this year, you need to be able to show, like, the goal from the next 2. Okay, here's what the next 2 years ideally should look like. This year should be, it starts off with some vets in some of these positions. It starts off, with your Escobar at short, with your Hernandez at second. And by mid-season, by the trade deadline, you've started to ship these guys out and you've transitioned to some of these prospects, and they need to show that they're getting the valuable experience so that when you open next year, you're in the conversation for third place in the East versus last in the East. And you need to show Juan Soto that, hey, these guys have promise. I don't know if they're all going to work out, but I think enough of them will work out that if Juan Soto stays, you are going to be contending for the division in 3 seasons.
Well, this is a sport where the division matters so much, right? Because you play your team so often. I think the one thing that really hurts the Nationals is that the Mets want to win, the Braves just won, the Phillies are trying to win, right? So the idea of what it looks like of us trying to win, could be dictated by who. It's like, okay, the Nationals might have their version of trying to win, but the Mets version of trying to win looks a whole lot more. They're spending a lot more money. They're out there a lot more. If that makes sense to you, yeah.
So you have to look at how each team in the division is building their roster to compete. The Braves have graduated a lot of players. And so the challenge for the Braves is keeping that team together. The Mets are trying to spend money to fill holes. They're trying to buy their way to a roster. The Marlins are building around pitching. And they have, I'm impressed with all the different pitchers that Miami has.
Yeah, I'm
Miami's really getting together a group of arms. Philadelphia, I don't really know what they're doing. I don't really have an answer to what Philadelphia is doing. But you have to look at what can the Nationals do that is different from those teams to still be in contention. And I think the Nationals, you have the ability to, you've got to get these pitchers, and you've got to get more guys at your infield spots. I mean, right now, I would say you have to figure out who's going to be your shortstop of the future. That's something you've got to figure out. You've got to figure out, can Keyboom do it? And if not, who can? If you can answer those questions and these pitchers can all hit like we know they can, I think you can compete with the Atlantas and the New Yorks in 2 or 3 years. But it's just you just need more information. And the way to get information is to get these kids on the field as much as possible, playing
reps, baby, reps.
Whether it's AAA or the major leagues, get them playing every day.
All right. Well, I think we've hit it all, man. What else? There's the Nats. They're going to suck next year, but when a team sucks, it's fine. I've mentioned this a bunch because Nats fans have been upset on Twitter. Guys, it's okay. There are things you can watch and look for in a team that's not bad. Is this player, because the Nats got so many trade pieces. I mean, the fact they got Lane Thomas in a throw, somebody traded for John Lester was that was criminal. I mean, I'm not sure who in 2021 should be trading, shout out to the Cardinals. But Lane Thomas was decent. You know what? He deserves a shot. He deserves a shot at left field next year.
I will go on a limb and say the two best values last year was getting something for John Lester. And the Braves getting the Braves not only getting something for Pablo Sandoval, but getting Eddie Rosario for Pablo Sandoval. Right. No, those two deals were the best. Why did you give anything of value for that player?
Well, it's one of those where, and look, the Nationals could easily be on the other side of this if Robles sucks this year, right? They could be in a situation where, Robles walks, they have to give Robles away or whatever it is. And he's great somewhere else, right? If he hits 250 and plays best defense in the league at center field, and you're like, wow.
He hit 203 last year.
Right. If he hits 250 with that defense, you're like, I'll take it. I'll take that. But baseball is the sport where, we see this sometimes. NFL, there is some of this, but baseball is a sport where it's like, this guy, what in the hell, Chris Flexen, right? Paul Sewald, 2 former Mets who ended up doing a great job on the Mariners. It's such a change of scenery sport. And Lane Thomas, a good example of that. Riley Adams.
Willie Adames.
Yeah.
Willie Adames left Tampa Bay and just destroyed it in Milwaukee to the point where, and then Nelson Cruz, side note, Nelson Cruz was awful when he went to Tampa Bay to the point where I'm beginning to wonder, is it the batter's eye in Tampa Bay? Because guys have talked about, I can't see when I go to Tampa to bet, when we're playing a game in Tampa, everybody seems to slump offensively.
I'm not sure why that would be. I mean, it's not.
I think it's the batter's eye.
Warehouse.
It's
essentially playing a warehouse.
It's a terrible field. Yeah,
it's the worst place. But yeah, that's the weird thing about baseball. I mean, here's the thing: is look, I thought some of the deals the Nats made last year were great. I thought some of them were not so great. But you've got a collection of guys, and like you said, that's they have to sell Soto. Is we're gonna we're putting our thing through the water and we're gonna shake it out. We're using our pasta ladle, whatever the hell they're called. To figure out, all right, what's real, what's not. What do we want to eat? What do we want to keep on the dinner dish? What do we want to throw away? That's what's coming up, really. Yeah. All right, Lindsay, tell the folks where can they find you? Where can they find your work and all of its wonderful variety?
All right, so my show, Locked On MLB Prospects, available wherever you get your podcasts for free on all platforms every day. You can follow us on Twitter at LockedOnFarm. You can follow me on Twitter at Crosby Baseball.
You can follow me on Twitter at @JoshNeighbors_. You guys can follow the show at LO_Nationals. If you want some Big 12 content, best basketball conference in America, there it is, the flag right there, at LO Big 12 on Twitter as well. So doing both things. And also, we'll definitely be talking about some of those guys from the Big 12 conference that'll be some impact prospects I'm sure. So that'll be fun, Lindsay. You and I can talk some college baseball as well.
Can't wait.
All right, everybody, once again, thank you guys for listening. Find our shows wherever you guys find them. Find us on Twitter as well. Until next time, my friends, as always, stay safe.